My name is Alex Turner, and I'm 35, an IT manager with a knack for noticing the smallest details. It's not a glamorous life, but it's steady, and until recently, I thought it was solid. My wife, Sarah, and I have been married for nearly a decade. She's 30, sharp, and works as an executive assistant at a high-end consulting firm in the city. We have 2 kids, Lily and Ben, ages 6 and 4, who bring color into my otherwise routine-driven life. I've always found joy in the little things. Reading bedtime stories, packing lunches, school drop-offs, and late-night talks with Sarah. That was our life, at least as I knew it. The morning it all started was supposed to be like any other. I always take the kids to kindergarten. It's our little tradition. Dropping them off and talking to them on the drive has always been my favorite part of the morning. But that day, as I was buttoning my shirt, Sarah told me she'd handle the drop-off. Her tone was firm, almost urgent, which threw me off a bit. Sarah isn't one to break routines, especially when she knows how much these moments mean to me and the kids. But I shrugged it off, figuring she had her reasons. I'll admit there was a small part of me that wanted to question her. I wanted to ask her if everything was okay or if she needed help with something, but things have been tense between us lately, though I couldn't quite put my finger on why. Maybe we were both just busy, swept up in the tide of work, kids, and bills. I decided to let it go. It was a busy day ahead at work, so I didn't dwell on it. I watched her hurry out the door with the kids in tow, and for a moment, I felt a strange tug in my gut. Call it instinct or just a sign I was missing. Either way, I brushed it off. It's funny looking back on it how easy it is to ignore these tiny red flags. These small, unsettling shifts in someone you think you know. But at that moment, I dismissed it as just an odd moment. As I got into my car, I realized I'd forgotten my work phone back at home. It's not just any phone. It's my lifeline to the team, especially in emergencies. I glanced at my watch. There was still time before my first meeting. Without a second thought, I turned back. Little did I know that quick decision would change everything. When I got back to the house, I expected it to be empty. I pushed open the door, listening to the soft creak as it closed behind me. I was met with silence at first, the kind of silence that settles in a house after everyone's left. But as I stepped further inside, I heard the unmistakable giggles of Lily and Ben coming from the living room. My heart stopped for a beat. They should have been in kindergarten by now. My mind raced as I walked down the hall, each step echoing in my ears. I walked in, and there they were, sprawled on the floor with their toys. They looked up and beamed when they saw me. The innocence in their faces nearly broke me right then, but I held it together. Confused, I knelt down and asked, "What are you 2 doing here? Didn't Mom take you to school?" Lily looked up, her innocent eyes wide as she explained, "Mommy said we'd go later. She got into a big black car with some man and said she'd be back in a few hours to take us to the mall." A million thoughts flooded my mind. A big black car with some man? I kept my voice calm, not wanting to alarm the kids. But inside, a strange fury was already building. I forced a smile and gave each of them a quick hug before telling them that Daddy would take them to kindergarten after all. I drove them to school, trying to piece together what was happening. My mind was a blur, racing between shock, hurt, and anger. Sarah was meticulous about schedules and routines. She'd never leave the kids waiting like that, especially not with vague promises about the mall. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, deeply wrong. When I dropped the kids off, I forced myself to smile and wave goodbye, trying to keep the rising storm inside me hidden. I'd always considered myself a calm man, not quick to jump to conclusions. But this was different. Sarah was out there somewhere with another man, leaving our children to wait at home. The thought gnawed at me. Each image it conjured more painful than the last. Deciding to take a wait-and-see approach, I went to work, but I couldn't focus. I kept glancing at my phone, half expecting a call from Sarah, an explanation, anything. By early afternoon, my phone finally buzzed. It was Sarah, her voice low and shaky, almost tearful. "Alex, I don't know how it happened, but the kids, they got lost. I thought they were at kindergarten, but I just got a call, and they're not there. I'm so sorry." She was rambling, her words jumbled with barely contained panic. I listened, a strange calm washing over me as she stumbled through her story. I didn't tell her I already knew exactly where they were, safe and sound in their classroom, because I'd taken them there myself. I wanted to see how deep she'd dig this hole. I kept my voice steady. Don't worry, Sarah. I'll take care of it. Just calm down and we'll figure this out. When I hung up, I leaned back trying to process everything. Her story didn't add up. If she'd been the one to drop them off, how could she not know where they were? And why had she waited until now to call me? A part of me wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. This was my wife, the mother of my kids. But the other part of me knew I couldn't ignore what was right in front of me. So I made a decision. I'd get answers, but I'd do it quietly. That evening after putting the kids to bed, I called my old friend, Mike. He worked as a private investigator, and I knew he'd help me without asking too many questions. Mike had been through his fair share of cases. Cheating spouses, missing people, fraud. It's hard to imagine your own life reduced to something so clinical. So much like one of those cases he told me about. I laid it out for him, feeling both ashamed and relieved to finally say it out loud. Mike, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I think Sarah's cheating on me. He didn't respond right away, but I could feel his presence, his quiet empathy on the other end of the line. I'll look into it, Alex. I know this isn't easy, but I'll be discreet. You'll know soon enough. Mike didn't waste time. He got to work the next day, starting with surveillance on Sarah and a little digging into her workplace. I felt like a character in some crime drama, watching my own life from the outside. But I pushed those feelings down. I needed the truth. The days blurred together as I waited, each one marked by careful detachment. I came home every evening, had dinner with Sarah, tucked in the kids, and went to bed beside her, lying there, staring into the dark. Over the next week, Mike sent me updates, each one more damning than the last. Sarah was meeting her boss, an older man named Richard, in the afternoons. They take long lunches, often at secluded spots, sometimes even leaving town for hours under the pretense of client meetings. She had told me about Richard before. He was charismatic, the type who could charm his way out of anything. Now I realized just how much charm he'd been putting to use. The final nail came in the form of photographs, undeniable proof of her betrayal. Mike had caught them outside a hotel, laughing and leaning into each other like teenagers, oblivious to the world around them. I stared at those images, feeling a numbness settle, and followed by an icy resolve. I had my proof. Sarah was cheating on me with her boss. The decision was clear now. I wasn't going to confront her in a heated argument. I was going to make her regret this in ways she'd never see coming. With the evidence in hand, I knew exactly how I wanted to proceed. Confronting Sarah in a heated exchange wouldn't accomplish anything. I wanted something more enduring, something that would make her realize the depth of her betrayal long after I was out of the picture. I wasn't going to let her and her boss walk away from this unscathed. The first thing I did was contact a lawyer. I found one who specialized in high-conflict divorces and explained the situation in detail. He was sharp, thorough, and most importantly, discreet. Together, we laid out a strategy that would ensure I had the upper hand. I started by adjusting our finances. I transferred my savings into an account under my name and began moving any joint assets that were legally mine. I also started documenting Sarah's behavior and actions with the kids. The way she'd been unreliable with them. The days she'd left them waiting. Even small instances of neglect I'd overlooked before. Through Mike, I learned that Sarah's boss, Richard, was well known in his industry. Respected, but with a few whispers of extracurricular activities. This was valuable information. I didn't need to ruin his entire career. I just needed to ensure a well-timed blow to his reputation. Mike agreed to send a discreet, anonymous tip to the higher-ups at Richard's company about his frequent meetings with a subordinate. In his world, even rumors of impropriety could have far-reaching consequences. Every day, I played my role as the unsuspecting husband, keeping my anger buried beneath a calm exterior. I decided on my path, and now it was all about patience. It was almost therapeutic in a way to have this secret plan that only I knew about. For once, I was in control of the situation, and it felt good. The days that followed were a strange mixture of anticipation and control. I kept up appearances, treating Sarah with the same reserved politeness, giving her no reason to suspect anything was amiss. She had no idea that I already knew the full extent of her betrayal, or that I was quietly dismantling the life we had built together. I used this time to execute my plan down to the smallest detail. With Mike's help, I gathered every bit of information I needed to paint a clear picture of her neglectful behavior as a parent. Emails, messages, dates, and times, it was all there, logged and ready. My lawyer was impressed, and we finalized our strategy for the custody agreement. Given her documented neglect in my preparation, I knew I stood a good chance of securing full custody of Lily and Ben. Meanwhile, the anonymous tip Mike had sent about Richard's indiscretions had started to ripple through his workplace. He'd been called into a meeting with HR, and though he wasn't outright fired, his spotless reputation was already beginning to tarnish. I took a cold satisfaction in knowing he was finally facing some consequences. The day of the confrontation was fast approaching, and everything was falling into place. I had planned it meticulously. Sarah thought we were going to meet with a financial advisor to discuss some restructuring of our assets, a meeting I'd fabricated to get her in a neutral setting. Instead, we'd be meeting in my lawyer's office, where she'd be blindsided with the divorce papers and the evidence of her affair. I knew this was going to hurt her, maybe even break her, but I didn't care. Her betrayal was complete, and my sympathy for her was gone. I wasn't interested in making her understand what she'd done to me. I wanted her to feel the consequences and know that her decisions had left her with nothing. The day of the confrontation arrived. I woke up early feeling a strange calm, almost like an athlete before a big game. Sarah seemed oblivious, too caught up in her own plans to notice the tension beneath my cool demeanor. We had agreed to meet at the office of the financial advisor later in the afternoon, and she'd arranged for a friend to watch the kids. When we arrived, she looked around a bit confused by the setting. My lawyer, Mr. Caldwell, was waiting for us in his office. I introduced him, casually watching as her expression shifted from polite confusion to a dawning realization. "Alex, what is this?" she asked, her voice uncertain. For the first time in months, I saw a crack in her usual composure. "Sarah, I think it's time for some honesty," I replied, my voice steady. "Mr. Caldwell is my attorney. We're here to discuss our divorce." Her face turned pale, and she opened her mouth, but no words came out. I handed her the folder that contained the evidence Mike had gathered, the carefully compiled timeline of her affair, and the formal petition for divorce. "You don't have to say anything. Everything I need to know is in there," I said, my voice almost detached. I didn't want a confrontation. I wanted her to understand, in no uncertain terms, that this was over. She thumbed through the documents, her hands trembling. The photographs, the timestamps, the receipts, all of it was there, laid out plainly. She glanced at me, her eyes wide, but I held her gaze without a hint of sympathy. As she read, Mr. Caldwell explained the terms of the divorce. A clean split with the majority of our assets allocated in my favor, given her indiscretions. I'd also filed for full custody of Lily and Ben, citing her recent behavior and Mike's documentation of her neglectful parenting. Finally, she found her voice. "Alex, please, can we talk about this? I made a mistake, but we can work through it." I cut her off, my tone final. "No, Sarah, you didn't make a mistake. You made a series of choices, each one taking you further away from this family. There's nothing left to discuss." The final blow came when I mentioned Richard's HR investigation. "You might also want to check in with your boss," I added, allowing myself a hint of satisfaction. It seems his little secret isn't quite so secret anymore. Her face twisted with a mixture of shock and betrayal, as though I'd wronged her. But there was no room for sympathy left in me. When it was over, Sarah left the office in a daze, her world unraveling in the span of a single afternoon. I felt a strange, quiet sense of closure. She was out of my life, and I'd secured a stable future for my children. The vengeance wasn't loud or explosive. It was precise, like a cut made by a surgeon, removing the rot to leave only what was healthy. In the weeks that followed, I adjusted to life as a single father, focusing on Lily and Ben and building a life where trust and stability were paramount. Sarah's affair became a whisper in our neighborhood, and Richard's career never quite recovered. He was reassigned to a lower role. His authority and reputation chipped away. Sarah herself moved to a small apartment across town, her life reduced to the remnants of the choices she had made. As for me, I found peace in the simplicity of my new life. I didn't dwell on her betrayal or let it shadow my future. I had closed that chapter, and in its place, I had built something better, something real. I knew this wasn't the ending Sarah or her boss had expected. They'd thought they could act without consequence, but life has a way of catching up, of making people face the outcomes of their decisions. And as I watched my kids laughing in the backyard, I felt a sense of satisfaction. Not because I'd gotten revenge, but because I'd taken control of my life. And in doing so, I'd secured a future for the only people who truly mattered. Thank you, friends.